Welcome to episode 49 of Enter the Mind podcast, the most real talk, no nonsense podcast on the empowering of the mind. Today we'll be talking about thoughts. Are they automatic or do we create them? Before we get to that, Kyra, what's going on this weekend with you? Or this week, I should say.
Freedom. I don't work at my job anymore, so I finally went to the bookstore and I got 2 new books, which is really exciting. And
agreements.
Yeah.
And what's
I finally got this one. It's called The Feel Good Effect. I just feel like when I read like what I read in the book, I don't know, I just feel like she really touches some good stuff. She's really spitting some fire in here, I feel like. So how are you?
Nice. I'm doing good. Just staying very regular with my schedule, going to bed early, waking up early, doing my workouts, but it's working out for me. So for now.
Good.
Late night party time will be coming up later in this month. So
love it.
Okay, but in terms of today's topic, so are thoughts automatic? What made me think of this topic? Well, I've been traveling to Chicago lately, visiting family. And one thing I always notice when I visit family, since I live on the other side of the country and I don't see them as much, is that when I'm around them, I notice like certain thought patterns that they have. And I realize that I have that too, to some extent. And it's almost like, I remember this, when I played hockey in Chicago, the owner of the rink, he had this like 10-year-old son, and he was kind of a funny character because he would kind of like, the owner would like just kind of like walk around, and he just had he had funny mannerisms to him, right? And then his 10-year-old son was just like him. Like he was like a mini me. And it was the funniest thing, because you're like, look at him, he's just like his dad, or something. And we might pick up on these things, even if it's just mannerisms, twitches, walking a certain way. But the point is, psychology. You inherit your psychology from people that you are around, not just parents, but teachers, aunts or uncles or whatnot. And it's so invisible, and yet it's becoming visible to me when I interact with the family, and I just like, I witness their thought pattern. A situation happens and they react a certain way, and I'm like, whoa, that's interesting, because I kind of react that way, but I'm always actively trying to change my reactions, in the model of basically success mindset. For instance, if something negative happens, how do I spin that around? How do I see the hidden opportunity there, right? And that's mental training that I do for myself constantly, right? So, but when I see someone else, maybe someone beginning on their self-help journey or their success mindset journey, and I see them, they're at stage 1 and I'm at stage, let's say 4, and I see them making the same thought mistakes that I made at stage 1, it's clear to me, like, wow, I've really retrained my mind in some ways. I still have more to go. I'm not at stage 10, but I can tell for sure I'm not at stage 1 anymore. So that's just a bit of a jumping off context. What are your thoughts so far on what I've said?
I think that this is a brilliant topic for today. It was really nicely said. How the little boy acts exactly like his dad. And I definitely feel like there are certain times, like when I'm just like out with my friends or chilling in my house, and I'll realize that I kind of remind myself of my mom. And I'm like, I don't know how I could remind myself to my mom. I spend most of my days making sure that I'm completely different than my mom. But I think that this goes back to, I guess, what I have a belief, and I'm pretty sure that most people are aware of it, that it's not about what you're doing or how you're acting. It's about what you think about what you're doing and how you're acting. So it's like, you know, I may have some of the same mannerisms as my mother and my father, or maybe even my brother. But the fact is that what is going on in my mind when I am doing these things and I guess acting in this specific way, I'm thinking something completely different than I know that any of my family is thinking. So I feel like there's definitely a fine line when it comes to like having mannerisms of your parents, you know, like maybe you were Italian, or maybe like your mom is Italian, right? And maybe they taught you to twirl the spaghetti with the spoon. When you eat spaghetti, do you twirl it with the spoon and like pick it up, or do you just do it with the fork?
I think I do the second one.
Yeah, me too. I wasn't raised like that, right? So those are my mannerisms. It's like something that I was taught by my family, right? But like just because I'm twirling my spaghetti in this way doesn't mean that I'm exactly like my mother. I'm exactly like half the population. We all twirl our forks, you know, like that. So you can have mannerisms of your parents. You know, I think that it comes down to those tiny things where it's like you think like, oh, I kind of react like that. Like when I'm in traffic, right? And maybe I grew up and my mom was like really angry in traffic, you know, maybe she was like, fuck you, go to hell, you know, one of those crazy drivers, right? And I don't entirely recall her doing it most of the time, but I think that there are times when she's slipped up, you know, just like most of us have, right? But I may have got that from my mom, and maybe I don't want to react that way anymore, you know, so I can change it. And I feel like that's that, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think it's possible for sure. I mean, step one is awareness. Step one always is awareness, right? So once you become aware that your thoughts are kind of, number one, very fast and automatic, and number two, that they have an origin somewhere, whether it was a movie that you saw over and over when you were a kid, or, you know, whether it was the, you know, parenting or your older siblings, right? It has a source, right? So once we become aware of it, then step two is like, how do you change it if you need to change it? And I think that really changing your mind is kind of like moving a large, like a large ship, like the Titanic, right? Or a cargo ship. Like you have to like slowly change its direction, and it's going so slow you almost cannot tell that it's turning. It's going that slow. But it's kind of like, I had an idea like this morning, which was like, you know, I woke up, thought about, you know, what was I dreaming last night? And I realized you don't really choose your dreams, right? Like they're kind of, you can say they're automatic, right? Like you go to bed and then it's just kind of these almost random things that go through your mind in your dreams, right? But if I told you, like, I'll give you $1 million if tonight you can dream that you're being chased by zombies, like you would, I mean, you might binge watch these zombie movies before you go to sleep. Like you would do these things that actually might they might cause a dream of zombies, right?
Mhm.
And if dreams are the manifestations of the subconscious mind, then essentially you're affecting your subconscious mind. And it doesn't happen quick. Like you don't think, oh, easy. Okay, tonight I'll dream about this zombie, apocalypse. No, you have to kind of do this massive bombardment, like total immersion in this like zombie stuff, just totally watch these movies, forget about everything else. And there's a high chance that you'll have a zombie dream during the night, right? So when it comes to like changing our thoughts, right? I think it's just this, you just need this continual reminding, like putting reminders. Sometimes I do reminders on my phone to go off every 30 minutes if it's related to mindset, right? Like a reminder would be like, what's the hidden opportunity here? And this thing's going off on my phone every 30 minutes. Because if I don't have that, I will get hooked by the pendulum. I will get swept up in the energetic waves of my environment. Whatever people are thinking, whatever not mass media, the mass consciousness in my environment, I'll get hooked by that. And so one of my goals like this week, or my goal actually I wrote down in my planner, is to get through the week without being hooked by the pendulum. And if people are not sure what that means, I'll refer you back to a previous episode where we talked about energy. But it basically means not being swept up by your environment and sort of the energy of your environment. If everybody's being negative, how do you not get hooked into that, right? How do you stay positive if everyone around you is negative? And it takes some self-discipline, but I think it can be done.
Now, I love that it's so true, because it's like you definitely have to immerse yourself in something for it to, make a home, get a house up inside your head. And I feel like if you immerse yourself in, I guess, like concreteness, certainty, I feel like this is an insight that's been downloading into my head recently. And it's like, if you're completely certain about it, you're completely certain about this, then you don't really start to realize the halt and the limit that certainty places on your brain. In order for your brain to veer off into open paths that are shining right in, you need to let go of the certainty. And I was thinking about it yesterday when I was thinking about how my day was going to go. And I was thinking, and I think to myself, I think that my thoughts are running on just an autopilot right now. I feel like I don't know what's going on right now. Why am I so certain that I'm not going to hang out with anybody today? Why am I so certain that I'm going to sit in my bed and watch Vampire Diaries? Because I'm obsessed with it. But why am I so certain that I'm not going to do anything significant or entirely fun and incredible with my day? Why am I so certain that no surprises are going to come up in my day? When you're so certain about something, your autopilot thoughts, they don't have space to move and they don't have space to breathe. So it's like, say you see an old family member that you haven't seen in a long time, and you go, they go, how you been doing? You go, I'm doing really good. I'm doing really good. And then they say something on autopilot, right? Like, and they're kind of like, you still do this and that? And it's like, oh yeah, I do. And then they look at you and they're like, you, right? And it's like, are you even thinking about the conversation that we're having, or are you just going on autopilot? Do you have a certain set idea about me that when you speak to me, that your thoughts cannot go anywhere else but to this one exact autopilot spot where you're not even thinking about what you're saying to me? So I feel like there's definitely, I've written a post once about healthy autopilot thoughts, and then eventually trying to veer off autopilot all in general. So it's kind of like a 3-step process. It's like, first, you realize that your thoughts are on autopilot and you're not even really thinking about what you're saying to somebody because you are so goddamn certain in your brain. And then the second step is switching that autopilot to a different autopilot and a beneficial autopilot. So that way now really beneficial thoughts are just kind of going on autopilot in your head, right? But then that's not really beneficial either, because though they're good, they're a little bit ingenuine. They're a little bit because they're autopilot. They're just, they're autopilot. We've set ourselves on autopilot, right? So then that third step is understanding the difference between that beneficial part of the autopilot, but then also being able to kind of wean off the nipple of the autopilot and sort of really start thinking for yourself, genuinely feeling and thinking for yourself and having those natural, genuine answers. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's such a cool model. I wrote that down.
Thanks.
The 3 stages. What I wrote down was going from negative autopilot to positive autopilot, but you're still on autopilot. And then finally reaching a place where you're genuinely thinking and feeling. Yeah, I think that's pretty solid. Anytime I go to the store, I always interact with the cashier, whether it's, a cafe or a grocery store, whatever. And it's interesting to observe how many people give you the autopilot responses versus a genuine response. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you what, when you do come across someone who gives you that genuine response, I think those are, maybe it's 1 out of 5, just to throw out a estimate from my experience. But that 1 out of 5 people, that's a really cool person. You ask them, hey, how's your day going, right? And the cashier's you watch them think about it, whatever, and they're like, well, I'm excited my break's almost up, or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. Versus the traditional, oh, I'm good, how are you, right? And it's kind of cool because you realize wow, this person's actually in the present moment. This person's actually processing their reality in a genuine way. They're actually taking things as it comes at them, and they're tossing it back. So they're really interacting, playing with reality. They're not stuck in their head,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I really like that because I think that I've mentioned on here before that the way that you come off to people is the way that they are called to respond. So it's sometimes, I'm on autopilot in the line, right? So I'll be like, hey, how are you? And they're like, good, you? And I'm like, good, and it's peace, right? But then there are other times when I'll genuinely ask somebody hey, how are you? Are you doing good today? And they'll be like, yeah, I'm doing good. And they'll look up at you and make eye contact with you. And they'll shift a little bit more into the present moment because you actually cared about them. They're a human, they're a worker. just like you. It's just a normal human, you know, that's at work, that probably would love to have a conversation with you because work can suck sometimes, you know? So it's nice to genuinely ask somebody how, you know, they are. But then there's also when you genuinely ask somebody how you are and it's like, oh, like, how are you? And they're like, good. I'm like, oh, okay. All right, Kimosabi. No worries. You have a good day. You know, so yeah, there are definitely those sort of people who are just always on autopilot and they're kind of just like, good, 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 good.
And I think there's an important distinction there to make, which is that when the person says like, I'm good, like very quickly, there's two possibilities. One is that they did that fully consciously and intentionally, and they're trying to communicate something through the way that they're saying it. And that's probably not the case. What's more likely is number two, they are just completely not aware of their communication. They have put their communication on autopilot, right? And so they're just automatically responding to their environment, which to me, that's concerning, you know, because it's like you can, I mean, there's no rule against giving short answers and saying, I'm fine, right? But it's like, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to express? What's your intention of communicating when you do that, right? And so the issue is, it's a matter not of was your answer sort of like short or was it long, or it's more of a matter of like, are you aware of the things that are coming out of your mouth and how they're affecting your environment?
Completely agreed. And I think that one of the worst parts of autopilot is not, you've become almost like dead. You've just become, it's like almost like you're dead inside. Like you're not there. And it sucks. It's horrible because I've been on autopilot before, you know, I know what it feels like to be on autopilot. And I remember that when I got out of autopilot, you know, it's like, wow, I was pretty dead. I was pretty dead. I didn't think about anything. I didn't feel about anything. I was like a zombie, right? So I think that worst part is having that autopilot on set every single morning, every single day when you wake up. You know, you wake up, autopilot, it's gonna be an okay day. You know, you go outside, it's way too sunny, right? You go, oh, it's way too sunny, right? And this is every day. Like you just wake up every day, you have that same autopilot reaction to everything. It's like you've somehow set in your mind that you have to feel the same way about something every single time. And I think that we need to normalize change of feelings over something, right? It's like say it's 4th of July and you wake up and you're like, oh my God, it's 4th of July. Like, I hate 4th of July. This fucking sucks. I hate what happened to me years ago. This fucking sucks. I'm not going to do this, right? And that's your autopilot. That's you connecting that with something that happened in the past when you are a different person today. So those autopilot thoughts are doing you any good, and you're kind of dead because you're not giving yourself the room, the space to live, feel, and breathe again, to feel and breathe again.
Yeah, so well said. Room to live and breathe. I wrote down, I think it was great what you said. We need to normalize changing your feelings about something, right? And I think there are some questions, as we start to wrap up, let's think of some powerful questions that we can ask ourselves, because I think one of them is this question of whose reaction is it? So for instance, you walk outside, like you were saying, it's sunny out, and you're like, oh, the sun, like, you know, I don't like the sun or something like that. If you stop right there and ask, whose reaction is that? Like, who just said that? I feel something shifts inside of me. What about you? You have a reaction?
I definitely do. I'm making a joke inside of my head. It's like you go outside, right? And you're like, oh, sun, right? And you ask yourself, like, hey, who said that? Like, that wasn't me. Like, who the fuck was that? Like,
then it turns into me, myself, and Irene with Jim Carrey, right? I never even saw that movie, but I think it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, that I think is very powerful because it speaks to the fact that a lot of kind of thoughts, reactions, behaviors you might have very well may have been inherited from others. So you have to kind of ask, whose reaction is this? Is it, you know, someone else's, or is it really mine? And then what is my true reaction to this? How do I want to react to this?
Yeah.
The whole focus, or the whole inspiration, I think, why I wanted to talk about this topic today is because my vision is to take full ownership of this up here, this real estate up here called my mind, and to take full ownership of it, full occupancy, right? Instead of owning this mansion and living in just one room, and there's other people in all the other rooms, you know, running this mansion, but you're only in one of the rooms. Like, you're not really like fully, I don't think you've achieved your full humanness. But by taking over this entire building, right, I feel like that's the path to go. And for sure, like, you know, we're human beings, and as a social species, we're always going to kind of absorb things from our environment, you know, see other people say or do certain things and kind of be influenced that a little bit. But the point is consciously like monitoring this, like the mind, you know, observing the mind as like it says something, and then instead of witnessing that as like, oh, why am I having that thought? It's sort of like, okay, well, what do I do with this? Right? Just like if you're feeling hungry, it's like, that's a feeling. So it's like, okay, so what do I do? Should I go eat? Should I not eat? Or if you're cold, right? It's like, should I put on a sweatshirt, or should I not put on a sweatshirt? Right? But then you have a thought, like an anxiety thought or a depressed thought. It's no different. You should be like, okay, so that's interesting information. What should I do with that? And rather than just being like, oh no, this anxious thought, or, you know, or, oh, I'm worried about what's gonna happen tomorrow, or anything like that. Just sort of, I guess, distancing yourself, but taking on a new perspective and thoughts. I don't know, I think I covered sort of a little bit of a wide range there. But I guess those are my final thoughts. I'll pass it to you.
I think that they were great final thoughts. And it's definitely, because like, it's all about the questions that you ask yourself, right? So it's like, I think that a really good question to ask is, you know, where did this thought come from? Like, is this my thought? Do I genuinely feel this way? Or, you know, is this maybe something that I've learned in the past, right? And then when you give yourself an answer, you can maybe ask yourself, like, was this a judgmental answer? Or is this coming from a space of love and just like curiosity? Like, where did that just come from? And then, you know, once you decipher that, then you could be like, what can I do to take control of my mind so that I can be genuine, so that I can be a really genuine person and human? So I think that those are definitely good questions to ask. And those are going to be my final thoughts for today, because my brain is fried and I need sleep. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. As always, we're so grateful for you.
Yes, totally. And we're interested in hearing what you guys think. So when you have reactions, I have people sending me text messages and DMs about these episodes. Put that in the comments so everybody can see it. You know, it's nice to get messages, but yeah, put it in the comments for whether you're watching on YouTube or on the podcast platforms. Yeah, let us know what you think and what future episodes you would like to see us talk about. Next week is going to be episode 50. So that's pretty dope. I'm sure we'll do something special for that. And until then, think deeply, put your existence first, and we'll see you next week.